Americans continue to fight over the place of religion in public schools. Questions about religion in the classroom no longer make quite as many headlines as they once did, but the issues remain an important battleground in the broader conflict over religion's role in public life. In this presentation, we will focus on information gained from two main resources: Religion in Public Schools from the Pew Research Center, and Guidance on Constitutionally Protected Prayer and Religious Expression in Public Elementary and Secondary Schools from the U.S. Department of Education. The relationship between religion and government in the United States is governed by the First Amendment to the Constitution, which, as the Supreme Court has held, both prevents the government from establishing religion and protects privately initiated religious expression from activities from government interference and discrimination. The legal rules that govern the issue of constitutionally protected prayer in public schools are similar to those that govern religion expression generally. The Supreme Court has repeatedly held that the First Amendment requires public school officials to show neither favoritism toward nor hostility against religious expression in such as prayer. The line between government-sponsored and privately initiated religious expression is vital to a proper understanding of the First Amendment's scope. As the court has explained in several cases, there is a crucial difference between government speech endorsing religion, which the Establishment Clause forbids, and private speech endorsing religion, which the Free Speech and Free Exercise Clause protect. The Supreme Court's decision to set forth principles that distinguish impermissible governmental religious speech from constitutionally protected private religious speech. For example, teachers and other private school officials, during their official capacities, may not lead their classes in prayers, devotional readings from the Bible, or other religious activities, nor may school officials use their authority to attempt to persuade or compel students to participate in prayer and other religious activities. Conflicts over religion in school are hardly new. In the 19th century, Protestants and Catholics frequently fought over Bible reading and prayer in public schools. In the early 20th century, liberal Protestants and their secular allies battled religious conservatives on whether students in biology classes should be taught Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. The Supreme Court stepped into those controversies when it ruled in Cantwell v. Connecticut in 1940 and Everson v. Board of Education of Ewing Township in 1947 that the First Amendment's Establishment Clause and Free Exercise Clause applied to the states. The two clauses say, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Before those two court decisions, courts had applied the religion clauses only to actions of the federal government. The most enduring and controversial issue related to school-sponsored religious activities is classroom prayer. In Engel v. Vitale in 1962, the Supreme Court held that the Establishment Clause prohibited the recitation of school-sponsored prayer in public schools. Lee v. Wiesman in 1992, which invalidated a school-sponsored prayer led by an invited clergyman at a public school commencement in Providence, Rhode Island. The court's 5-4 decision rested explicitly on the argument that graduating students were being forced to participate in a religious ceremony. The case effectively outlawed the practice that was customary in many communities across the country, thus fueling the conservative critique that the Supreme Court was inhospitable to public expressions of faith. In 2000, the Supreme Court ruled in Santa Fe Independent School District v. Doe that schools may not sponsor student-recited prayers at high school football games. These are just a few of the Supreme Court cases that have shaped our current policies regarding religion in school. Although the Constitution forbids public school officials from directing or favoring prayer in the official capacities, students and teachers do not have to shed their constitutional right to freedoms of speech or expression at the schoolhouse door. The Supreme Court has made it clear that private religious speech is as fully protected under the Free Speech Clause as secular private expression. Not all religious speech takes the place in a public schools or at school-sponsored events is governmental speech. For examples, nothing in the Constitution prohibits any public school student from voluntarily praying at any time before, during, or after the school day, and students may pray with fellow students during the school day on the same terms and conditions that they may engage in other conversation or speech. Students may also speak to or attempt to persuade their peers about religious topics, just as they do with regard to political topics. The U.S. Department of Education offers guidance when applying the constitutional principles to specific contexts. We will look at a few regarding prayer. Prayer during non-instructional time. Students may pray when not engaged in school activities or instructions, subject to the same rules designed to prevent material disruption of the educational program that are applied to other privately initiated excessive activities. Among other students may read their Bibles, Torahs, Korans, or other scriptures, say grace before meals, and pray or study religious materials with fellow students during recess, the lunch hour, or other non-instructional time to the same extent that they may engage in non-religious activities. Organize prayer groups and activities. Students may organize prayer groups and religious clubs gatherings before school to the same extent that students are permitted to organize other non-curricular student activity groups. Such groups may be given the same access to school facilities by assembling as it is given to other non-curricular groups without discrimination because of the religious perspective of their expression. Moments of silence. If a school has a moment of silence or other quiet periods during the school day, students are free to pray silently or not to pray during these periods of time. Teachers and other school employees may neither require, encourage, or discourage students from praying during such time periods. Accommodation of prayer during instructional time. Schools have the discretion to dismiss students to off-premises religious instruction, provided that the schools do not encourage or discourage participation in such instruction or penalize students for attending or not attending. Prayer in class assignments. Students may express their beliefs about religion in homework, artwork, and other written and oral assignments free from discrimination based on religious perspectives of their submission. Such home and school work should be judged by ordinarily academic standards of substance and relevance and against other legitimate pedagogical concerns identified by the school. Student assemblies and non-curricular events. Student speakers at student assemblies and non-curricular activities such as sporting events may not be selected on the basis that either favors or disfavors religious perspectives. When student speakers are selected on the basis of genuinely content-neutral, even-handed criteria and retain primary control over the content of their expression, that expression is not attributable to the school and therefore may not be restricted because of its religious or anti-religious context and may include prayer. Prayer at graduation. School officials may not mandate or organize prayer at graduation or select speakers for such events in a manner that favors religious speech, such as prayer. Baccalaureate ceremonies. School officials may not mandate or organize religious ceremonies. However, if a school makes its facilities and related services available to other private groups, it must make its facilities and services available on the same terms to organizers of privately sponsored religious baccalaureate ceremonies. There is also guidance from the U.S. Department of Education regarding religious expression. Religious literature. Students have the right to distribute religious literature to their schoolmates on the same terms that they are permitted to distribute other literature that is unrelated to the school curriculum or activities. Teaching about religion. Public schools may not provide religious instruction, nor may they teach, but they may teach about religion. For example, questions concerning religion, the history of religion, comparative religion, the Bible, or other religious teachings as literature, the role of religion in the history of the United States and other countries are all permissible public school subjects. Similarly, it's permissible to consider religious influences on philosophy, art, music, literature, and social studies. Although public schools may teach about religious holidays, including their religious aspects, and may celebrate the secular aspects of the holidays, schools may not observe holidays as religious events or promote such observance by students. School dress code and policies. Schools enjoy substantial discretion in adopting policies related to the student dress and school uniform. Schools, however, may not single out religious attire in general or attire in particular religion for prohibition or regulation. If a school makes exceptions to its dress code for non-religious reasons, it must also make exceptions for religious reasons, absent a compelling interest. Students may display religious messages of items on clothing to the same extent that they are permitted to display other comparable messages. Religious excusals. When school officials have a practice of excusing students from class on the basis of parents' requests for accommodations of non-religious needs, religiously motivated requests for excusal may not be accorded less favorable treatment. The rights of students. The leading school court decision on freedom of speech is the Tinker versus Des Moines School District in 1969, which upheld the right of students to wear armbands protesting the Vietnam War. The court ruled authorities may not suppress expression by students unless the expression significantly disrupts school discipline or invades the rights of others. This didn't completely clear things up. After years of uncertainty about these matters, several interest groups devoted to religious freedom and civil liberties drafted a set of guidelines, the Religious Expression in Public Schools, which the U.S. Department of Education sent to every public school superintendent in 1995. The department revised the guidelines in 2003, placing somewhat greater emphasis on the rights of students to speak or associate for religious purposes. These are the 4 general principles. Students acting on their own have the same right to engage in religious activity and discussion as they do to engage in comparable secular activities. Students may offer prayer or blessing before meals in school or assemble on school grounds for religious purposes to the same extent as other students who wish to express their personal views or assemble with others. Students may not engage in religious harassment of others or compel other students to participate in religious expression. Students may neither favor nor disfavor student groups on the basis of religious identities. The rights of parents. Parents sometimes complain that their secular practices at school inhibit their right to direct the religious upbringing of their children. These complaints typically rest on both the Free Exercise Clause of the First Amendment and the 14th Amendment's Due Process Clause, which forbids the state to deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. The Supreme Court has interpreted them as protecting the right of parents to shape and control the education of their children. When they object to certain school practices, the parents often seek permission for their children to skip the offending lesson or class or to opt out rather than end the practice school-wide. This decision by the Supreme Court of parents' rights to control their children's education came in Pierce versus the Society of Sisters in 1925, which guaranteed the rights to parents to enroll their children in private rather than public schools, whether the private schools were religious or secular. A great many districts, meanwhile, have recognized the force of parents' religious or moral concerns in the issues of sexuality and reproduction, and have voluntarily provided opt-outs from classes devoted to these projects. More recently, parents and students have, on religious liberty and other grounds, sued school districts to accommodate transgender students by allowing them to use the bathroom and locker facilities that match their current gender identity rather than their sex at birth. Some parents and students argue that the new arrangements violate their religious liberty rights because the school policy forces them to accommodate a set of moral and religious beliefs they disagree with. So far, however, federal courts have sided with the school districts that have accommodated transgender students. The rights of teachers and administrators. Without question, public schools employees retain their rights to free expression of religion. When off duty, school employees are free to engage in worship and any other lawful faith-based activity. When they are acting as representatives of the public school system, however, courts have said that their rights are constrained by the Establishment Clause. This limitation on religious expression raises difficult questions. The first is to what limits school systems may impose on the ordinary and incidental expression of religious beliefs by teachers in the classroom. Most school systems permit teachers to wear religious clothing or jewelry. Similarly, teachers may disclose their religious identity. For instance, they need not to refuse answer when a student asks, "Do you celebrate Christmas or Hanukkah?" or "Did I see you at the Islamic Center yesterday morning?" At times, however, teachers act in an uninvited and overly religious manner towards students and are asked by school administrators to refrain. When those requests lead to litigation, administrators invariably have prevailed on the grounds that they are obliged, for constitutional and pedagogical reasons, to be sensitive to the teacher's coercive potential. In general, then, the courts have ruled that public schools have substantial discretion to regulate the religious expression of teachers during instructional hours, especially when students are required to be present. The courts have also ruled, however, that the attempts by school to extend that control to non-instructional hours continually constitute an overly broad intrusion on the teacher's religious freedom. Thank you, and have a great day.